what I would like to talk with you about are the films. I think I've seen about 5 of your films now, and maybe your interest in documentary or nonfiction, as you say, as a whole, and perhaps the situation in India in general, in terms of filmmaking and documentary filmmaking in particular. And we'll see where it goes. We'll improvise. Okay? um, I read today that I didn't realize this, you're from Rajasthan, so that explains a lot of the recurring interest in that landscape in many of your films and in the cultural traditions there too, I suppose, doesn't it?
Actually, I'm supposed to be from a Kashmiri family,
Oh, I see.
and it so happens that that is my family, have been settled in Rajasthan for many years now. I think it must be at least 70, 80 years. Around the turn of the century, I think, or even earlier, there was a great exodus from Kashmir. And my family came to Rajasthan. Some families went to Allahabad, Lucknow, Delhi. So I was strangely brought up in a kind of Kashmiri family atmosphere. But the people who came from Kashmir, these mostly Brahmins, and I mean, the story is that they were somewhat like Jews, very affluent, and also the keepers of knowledge and things like that, and therefore they became very exploitative of the local population, which happened to be Muslim. And then the story goes that there was some forcible conversion, then there was a great exodus, and people who didn't want to be converted. So my ancestors came to the plains. But the more interesting part of the story is that they gave up their language, which was decided at a conference that took place in Lahore.
Really?
They gave up their food habits, which was adapted to the Mughal Muslim food habits, and they changed their costume. So living in Rajasthan was very strange for me. I was, on one hand, an outsider, and on the other hand, very much in the Rajasthani landscape. I mean, we spoke Urdu. We spoke Urdu as a language at home, not Kashmiri. And we were never really part of the Rajasthani landscape, in the sense of adapting to Rajasthani language, and. So I perhaps, in a sense, I would say that I saw Rajasthan being very much inside it from outside.
I see.
I was not, I mean, I can't call myself a Rajasthani. I mean, what I described to you was really to reach this, that my early experience of Rajasthan until my adolescence, were in a family that followed certain traditions, certain changed traditions, but cannot be said to belong ethnically to any local group in Rajasthan. Apart from the fact that my father was in civil service, so being a bureaucrat, he was anyway distanced from the population. But it's like, in a sense, it was wonderful because I don't carry any parochial feelings, but I have a lot of love for Rajasthan, which is very transparent in terms of my childhood. Otherwise, you have to carry this very parochial baggage in India, as you will find in most regional films, for example. And this is a conflict that has continued in cinema a great deal. What is regional? Say, what is Malayali? Bengali, Oriya, Gujarati, it's always thought of as more authentic and more Indian than, for instance, what is produced in Bombay, the commercial cinema, or in Madras, or even in Calcutta. But I come in a strange category because I am not from any region. And you can imagine, with this very ambivalent Kashmiri background, living in Rajasthan, then coming to Maharashtra about 20 years back to Pune, then here, married to a South Indian.
Oh, really? Well, actually, Bombay is full of people who are transplanted from everywhere.
Yeah, that's very true. But in Rajasthan, that was my relation, So when I go back to Rajasthan, I really don't go back as, for example, a Bengali might go to Bengal. I mean, I don't have those extra emotions, I must say. I don't know whether it's good or bad, but
Well, I think in the films you can see a kind of distance, but at the same time a great love for all of these cultural materials that you're dealing with. I mean, did you grow up absorbing that music that you show in several of your films?
oh yeah, sure enough. I mean, I must again tell you, for example, that it was unthinkable in my family that I will take up a career like film, because they were all administrators, My grandfather, who was very attached to me, was quite horrified when he came to know that I was going to become a filmmaker, because he thought that I'll be an administrator in one of the small districts of Rajasthan, and a sort of minor feudal lord, But I was from a very early age, quite dedicated to the idea of film. The discovery that I made of my eyesight, which was weak, and when my father put on spectacles, which was very late because I was a very quiet child, and when I put on the spectacles, the whole thing changed, and I saw a film, and I got very deeply involved in film right from the age of 12. I sort of never abandoned me.
Well, it's a very interesting story. That I read that in the other interview.
Yeah.
Almost like
Cooked
kind
up.
of religious experience. No, not cooked up at all. It's very plausible. I was very curious in seeing all these films, not only the ones about Rajasthan, but also, I guess the one about pottery takes place in Bengal, does it? No? Where was the film The Mind of Clay shot? Was that also
All over India.
all over?
All my films, actually.
Are they?
Most of my films, I would say, especially from Dhrupad. I decided in Dhrupad that I'm going to travel for at least 9,000 kilometers, and I had a very big bus, and I took off seats, about 10 seats from that bus. I put all the musical instruments, I put all my equipment, and I even had a small kitchen, and my entire unit was inside, and all the baggage was on the top. And I started my journey from here to Rajasthan, to Madhya Pradesh, to parts of Uttar Pradesh, to Bhopal, that is like returning, and then I went to Mandu, and I did the same thing in the next film, Marty Minus, The Mind of Clay. But I traveled 14,000 kilometers, and this time I went to South also. And I find that this peculiar production technique, because I call it that, when I travel with my entire unit, even my actors and actresses are with me for a month and a half. And I stop anywhere, and I don't shoot in a kind of cinema verite, for my films. I really have to set up. I even carry my trolley and things like that with 35mm cameras. So it's a huge setup, because I mean, carrying a BL camera means that you have two attendants, Carrying a Nagra tape recorder means you have one attendant. In India, there's a strange system, of attendants that come with the equipment. And with the result that the unit is very large, So I'm not able to take many shots in a day, and it's a very slow process, But I find that this way of traveling very slowly builds up the film in my mind much better. Well, I don't write scripts. Well, that's another great problem, or is going to become a great problem, because now more and more the television and other agencies in India would not accept a project unless you've written some sort of a script. And I just give them 2 or 3 pages, and then I go on a location hunt, and then I start working, and then I really improvise, My shots are never planned, even if I have visited a location. I just try to absorb that location in my mind. But I never think of setting up the camera in a certain angle and planning a certain shot and imagining how the particular potters or whatever will behave, and whether it be evening, morning. I like to respond at the time of shooting and organize my material bit by bit. I don't even organize the entire shot.
Do these 3 long films that I've seen that sort of, in my mind, go together because they're very similar in a way, do they preserve the sequence of these journeys that you went on?
In a sense, yes. I'll tell you, yes. In fact, it's a very nice question that you asked me, because in the absence of a script, my first way of cohering the film is to understand, after I have done my location work, as to how I'm going to map out my journey, I mean, often, of course, the sequences change later on, and I'll tell you why. But it's very important for me to understand that this particular thing, this particular idea, or this particular emotional response that I have towards pottery, let's say, is going to take place in this location. I mean, if it doesn't become concrete in my mind, that in fact it's going to take place in this village, near this house, I must have that absolutely concretely in my mind. I get very anxious if I am very uncertain as to where I'm going to show, the pottery being made, where I'm going to show, say, a kiln, where it'll be baked. I must know, exactly where. But then, of course, the nature of shots are such that when you put the whole thing together, initially when you have an assembly, the shots have a lot of mobility, because they discover their own context or position, But as I go on editing, of course, the shots then become a little immobile, as it were, like they don't move, and I begin to feel that I am feeling the structure, which means I am also against the idea of developing a structure of a film before it has been made. I really like to arrive at one. And as you saw in Mati Manas, for example, it follows a very old tradition in India. The tradition is that you have a story, and within that story, the characters would think of another story. And within that story, the characters would further think of another story. So it is, in a sense, a way of layering, in which you go to a deeper layer, go to a deeper layer. So in many of the stories used for example, explaining certain philosophical principles, because you have philosophical texts that have stories, that sort of illustrate, the philosophical point of view. They, for example, make a lot of false starts. They would pose a problem. Somebody will ask somebody, for instance, whether knowledge is the path or action. And before the person can answer, he said, I'll tell you a story. And you are taken into another scene where there is a similar situation, because he is telling him that there was somebody else who was faced with a similar problem. And there they'll go into the problem a little deeper, and those characters will then, one of them would talk of another story. I mean, this is a very popular structure in India, and I think it's actually the source of improvisation.
Your shots often have the same structure too, don't they?
Exactly.
Moving around and discovering a new place that's almost there by accident.
And then enter into it,
Yeah.
And having entered, you go into deeper. I mean, I think that that's the source of improvising, if you don't have a structured script moving from A to B to C. If you have something that goes deeper, comes back to the level B, again goes to level C, just makes a reference to A and goes into D, it is trying to be present almost at every circle, at every time, you know, like instead of moving in a line. And I like this very much. So actually, if you see the mind of clay specialists, you will find there's no reason for me to go from one thing to another, apparently. But on the other hand, many friends of mine have told me, you know, that here and outside of India, that they sort of appreciated the kind of movement it had, you know, of going from particular scene to another.
The improvisation in the shots, in their actual construction, however, is probably an illusion because they're so controlled because of all of these attendants and all of this equipment you're talking about, that the improvisation precedes the actual shot itself. I mean, you don't literally improvise as a shot is being taken, do you? I mean, you have the movement planned.
I'm sorry, because I was using the word improvisation in a way which is different from something propped up, you know?
Yeah.
Because you would have,
understand what
if you don't have a proper chair, you improvise.
Yeah.
I like to have a proper chair, but the way I'm going to sit on it, the way I'm going to talk is that I'm going to be free. I was talking about improvisation very much in terms of a discipline, which means that I mean, it's very fundamental, you know. For example, as I was talking to you the other day about music, you know, classical music. Now, what would you call that kind of improvisation when you're very strictly bound by not only the discipline, but with a certain melodic structure, what is called the rag? Then you are bound by the particular school of singing. Then you are bound by the master who sings in a special way and not like somebody else, you know, not like his brother. So within that, when you are learning Indian music, how do you improvise? How are you able to improvise? And I think I can only tell you a parallel that although beneath all this improvisation there is very strict grammar, grammatical principles, there is a lot of freedom and effortlessness, you know, to construct. I call that an improvisation. The moment you know the language, for example, English is not my language, and I'm sure I must be making a lot of mistakes while talking. But I'm speaking very freely at this minute to you, and I do not know exactly what I'm going to speak to you in another 3 seconds. But now the 3 seconds have passed, and I continue to speak because I am really improvising, and I am not at all conscious of the fact that I'm observing very, very strict grammatical principles of English language, so that English not being my language, you would detect very quickly the slightest mistake I make, you know. Although I am not conscious, and I'm sure those who have spoken this language as their mother tongue, I would think of the grammar much less than I do, as I do with my mother tongue. I don't think, you know. I mean, for example, a villager wouldn't even know what grammar is, but he's quite grammatical. I mean, in Indian music at least, this principle of improvisation is tied up almost in a linguistic paradigm, you know, as it were. I mean, you really have those basic structures that are deep and common, and you have very individuated expressions of the artist. So, my struggle really has been to understand, on one hand, such cinematographic principles, you know, that are common to films, and on the other hand, find my own expression. I have, in that sense, never belonged to a group. Especially, I have never belonged, you know. Although I've been labeled, you know, to be the new wave filmmaker or some avant-garde, I do not know. But as far as I'm concerned, I really think of myself as a traditionalist.
Well, there's certainly no one else in India doing what you were doing, that's for sure.
No, but I'd like to really emphasize this idea of tradition. That I think of tradition in cinematography as well, not only in India, but everywhere else, you know. I mean, it's a great thing that Bresson worked in a certain way. He's even now working. He made a beautiful film, L'Argent. Godard worked in a certain way. He's revived, I believe, recently. It's fantastic because I would imagine these to be traditions, you know, of cinema. And I'm happy that, at least in my time, I don't know what's happening with the film school now. People used to struggle mentally, to want to understand what kind of traditions will they follow. I mean, it's very adolescent to want to know whether you'll make a film like Godard or become very austere like Besson. But it's nice, this kind of preoccupation, because it might lead you on to your own disposition, and way of expressing.
Um, when you speak about tradition, do you also include a certain tradition of, say, ethnographic filmmaking? Do you consider that part of your heritage that you're working within? For example, Vertov's work
Do you consider Werthau's work ethnographic?
a lot of it, yes.
Yeah. A man with a movie camera and ribbon?
Yes, it's certainly it has a lot of validity as a record of urban life in the Soviet Union in 1929.
But it is, I would say that, say, a film which is sociological, or anthropological, something is ethnographic. These are not traditions, in my mind. I would say this is a way of universalizing. For example, if I am talking of history, it universalizes the reality, and it connects up the entire universe in a way which is historical, or historically understood. I would say when you talk of anthropology, it's the same reality. And when you talk of psychology, it's again the same people and same reality and same, history. But it connects up the entire reality in a different way, and you suddenly are faced with a world in, say, psychoanalysis, where the whole terminology of references to human emotions, everything changes, from, say, ethnography. I would say that just as these are various vertices in the sense of being disciplines, and therefore look at reality from a point of view, I think cinema itself is a vertex. Cinema itself has a capacity. Just as music has a capacity to universalize, which is quite different from the way painting does it. And painting, therefore, has certain traditions that music doesn't have. And what music has, the painting doesn't have. I think of traditions, therefore, more associated with the discipline and the practice of that discipline. I am hoping thereby that certain ways of setting up the camera, certain ways of relating to the reality, certain ways of using the camera, the sound, would in fact provide you with insights into reality, just as ethnography, history, or any other discipline does. I mean, ethnography, yeah, maybe ethnography is a way of recording, but perhaps one will have to speak of ethnology, as a discipline. Ethnography itself is, I suppose, you're right that you could call Werthau's film ethnographic because they are like some sort of a record. But I think the center of Werthau's vision was really that eye, and the eye and the camera, So I would think of it sort of differently, I mean,
He was very interested, though, in how a loaf of bread was made, and so are you.
yeah, sure enough. But you don't think that you could look at that loaf of bread from quite a few perspectives?
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, I could, for example, look at least India, at the making of a loaf of bread, and metaphysically, if I wanted to. You can do it very easily in India, And they do that. In fact, many of the religious metaphors, they come from the kitchen, from cooking, that is, in India. So I would say that my relationship with documentary, what is called documentary, is essentially a way of escaping from the narrative, not from the story. I like stories, When I say stories, I mean I like this idea of narrating. And I try very hard in the film to take shots in a manner as if things are being narrated, Even if I take a shot of a rock, I like it to tell me something, like as if it were narrating something to me. But I am emotionally, mentally, I am way back, I'm fed up with the narrative structure. That I have no. So the very first film that I made was in fact based on a story, and it is a very short story, in hardly 5 pages, And in that 5 pages, the meat of the story, it's very. I'll tell you. Excuse me for a distraction. When I was still young and I was a paying guest, as a bachelor when I made that film, and the people with whom I was living. With my first film, which was talked about a lot in papers and all, they suddenly realized that this paying guest that they had was quite a known figure. So they invited me for a dinner. And I went to, and it was a very nice Christian couple, Mr. and Mrs. Kuto. William was his name. And he told his wife, he said, Mrs. Kuto, this Mani Kaul has made a wonderful film, and of course he hadn't seen it. And he said, it is about this woman who waits at the bus stop. And she said, William, don't tell me the story. So she looked at me, and I told her there isn't anymore. That's all. And it's a fact. It's a 2-hour long film. There is nothing more, It's about the wait at the bus stop. So in my very first film, which was expected to be a fictional work, I had completely broken away from the narrative. In fact, I even broke away from the techniques such as flashbacks and flash forwards, which means that I tried to bring the mental life of that woman who was waiting at the bus stop and the physical things that were happening to her on the same plane. I decided to go back into her past whenever I wanted to. I decided to go into her future, and I decided to remain with her in the present. It is not through her, subjectively as it were, and take the camera close and sort of dissolve and things like that into a flashback. I mean, I devised methods in the very first film that it is totally non-dramatic, of course, and non-narrative, and it is even non-psychological because the characters have no motivation. Nobody in the film works on psychological motives, So I had, of course, it had all kinds of reactions to the film. What I'm trying to say is that even though when I attempted films that were financed to me as fictional works, I had a great interest in the non-fiction. Because I think that is the non-fictional work is really going to liberate this medium. Ultimately, it will free cinema from literature, from theatre, from acting, from actors, from music, from painting. It's a non-fictional work that alone can do it. And after making 2 more films after my first film, I made several documentaries, they're called, non-fictional work, where I could approach this problem more directly. But even while I continued making the fictional work, I was always very clear. I was very clear about the material I was using. For example, I was using a play. Now, I would not twist and, abridge that play and kind of even out a story from it, I'd respect the fact that it's a piece of literature, and therefore the literary aspect is very important, and I should not mutilate it in any sense, in order to adapt it to film. Which means by imparting a certain form of freedom, independence to that literary piece, I was hoping for a freedom for myself. I mean, therefore, I was actually not making a film on a play. I was trying to relate to a play. I have tried to relate to a folk story. I have tried to relate to the text of a writer. A film called Satyasavartha Admi, in which there were 2 poems, 2 essays, and 4 short stories put together into a 2-hour long film.
It sounds like a description of every one of your films.
Then I had, of course, a film on music, and I'm making another one on music. I cannot even claim to be practicing pure cinema. My only claim could be that in doing cinema on these subjects, I have not in any way distorted them, and therefore whatever little contribution I have made is also pure. And I am quite sure, just as a person who draws and draws and draws, figures and arms and legs and, faces, slowly learns that the tension he creates, in a line is far more important, than the need to actually draw the object. That the tension in the line, which is inwardly drawn more and more, suddenly creates the object, I mean, for example, especially you look at the drawings of Rembrandt, one of the most marvelous examples of drawing, I would say that it's rare to see, you see any other painter of the old, and I mean, you could leave Paul Klee out, but Rembrandt's drawings, such economical strokes, and they create the object in such great strength, that you are never not aware of the nature of that stroke, so that the figure, which is really the story of the drawing, sort of emerges in front of you, in front of your eyes. He doesn't follow, a story or a narrative. And something like this I'd like to do, I am quite aware that whatever I have done till now has been always incomplete, I feel that I have not been able to do what I want to. I feel all my works are sort of incomplete, and I can't think of them as accomplished, And this is a lot of anguish it creates in me, because after all, at some stage in your life, you should make films that you like perfectly. But up to now, I cannot claim that, because I am all the time struggling, to somehow come to that state, where when I take a shot, it creates a story. And I think that it's possible, It's possible in music. I know this, that when people sing in a certain way, it immediately creates an emotion. But when you're attempting to create an emotion and using music for it, and the whole thing sort of collapses. So I really feel that only the non-fictional area, this possibility.
One of the crucial differences between nonfiction and fiction is that you are shooting real people rather than actors, for me anyway. And I'm very curious about your relationship with those people that you're filming, because I think it looks very special. For example, all of the very awkward conventions of documentary in films division films or other films, their way of filming people, in which people feel very artificial and awkward and stiff, you seem to get around, and people seem to be very much involved in an authentic way with what they're doing in front of your camera, or involved with you as the filmmaker. I mean, you're one of the few documentary filmmakers in India I've seen that encourage people to look at you while you're filming them. You like exchanging a look with a subject.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you maybe talk a little bit more about your relationship with the people you're filming?
Absolutely, because, I am very opposed to the idea of filming somebody while that person is not aware of me. So for me, all that, as I said earlier, sort of cinema verite and natural shooting and hidden camera, personally, I mean, I don't like it at all. I don't like, because I feel that you cannot treat a being as if it were a phenomena. I feel that every being is in a state of struggle, and awareness is very much part of that struggle. I even treat nature like that, in a strange way. Even if I'm filming a stream flowing, I don't like to hide my camera, No, I really seriously mean this. I want that stream to actually retain its posture and speak to me, rather than film where the stream is not aware of the fact that it is being filmed, I mean, the idea behind really is that this idea of spontaneity and naturalness, I have never liked very much, I feel that people are beautiful when they are aware. And therefore, I do not know whether a film that doesn't have actors, I mean, I'll come to real people again, is necessarily non-fictional. You know, in the sense, the problem of consciousness on your part and on the part who's being filmed, you know. Well, it's if you lack that consciousness and you call that film non-fictional, I mean, how would you, for instance, it needs organization, it needs setting up the camera, it needs telling the person that he will be filmed and giving him some instructions. I mean, then what is the notion, you know, of non-fiction, you know? I think the problem really is when, whether a person is an actor or not, if that person actually comes closer to herself, then I think that there is a hope of achieving this non-fiction. But if that person has to move out of her skin and play another role, then I think you get into the realm of fiction. And the trouble with most actors is that they cannot remain in their skin, which is why it is safer to make a non-fictional work with non-actors. It is very rare to find an actor who would not like to remain outside of himself. That is somewhere in the mirror or in a dream, or but not within herself, you know. It's a tremendous problem with the actors because they cannot think of their body and mind as extensions of themselves, you know, of their self. Whereas when you work with non-actors, they're very naturally with themselves, and their awareness also actually reveals more and more about beings, you know, like not even human being, but being, you know.
What about musicians? As performers, they're sort of almost actors, aren't they? They're used to putting on a presentation to an audience. What about filming musicians actually performing?
Musicians, you know, are very difficult. I think are extremely difficult to film, not because they often take on a lot of postures and all, you know. Some of the musicians are impossible on this account because they really take on and really play to the gallery and, you know, take on all kinds of postures. In India, of course, they take on all spiritual postures, which is ridiculous. India is really too much because it exports all this nonsense, you know, from here, and you know, the people who are really involved, they never go out of this country because you know, this idea, for example, in music, when I say of posture, this idea of, you know, going into a state which is quasi-religious or meditative, or, you know, half the time it's just a posture. I mean, I know this because I only can go into any kind of that state, you know, through music. And I believe that for Indian music, it is essential to use hand gestures. I believe that, you know? And I grant that to a musician in India, that he uses both his hands, especially because you know that Indian music has a very characteristic movement between the notes. You know, for example, so you take the case of piano, and you have only sort of staccato, one, second, third, fourth, you know, or slow even, but you will go from one note to another, you know, but you will not travel the middle distance.
Right.
Now, traveling the middle distance is really traveling a dissonant area because that doesn't fall in the frequency harmony, you know, of notes. In India, the music, the really emotional aspect of music lies in that dissonant area. So often the musicians, in order to move from one note to another, you will find that they use their hands and they bring it down like that, or they close their eyes and they go into all kinds of gestures, almost, you know, they were dancing, only they haven't got up, sitting down. So use of gestures, therefore, is done beautifully and in a limited way, helps the musician and helps the audience, because it helps them to travel on that path, you know, that the musician is taking. So with musicians, they tend to get lost in India, you know, good musicians, they tend to get lost. And the difficulty that I experience, therefore, or I have experienced, is to find a kind of finite duration, you know, for the shot. because it just goes on, endlessly. But I think that you can still work out, I feel that you can give all your hassles, about production, about camera, about tape recorder, about lights to your actors, especially to non-actors. You can always make them aware of the fact that there are the problems, and they adapt themselves very beautifully, because they're not trying to prove themselves to me at all. But you put an actor in front of you, immediately he wants to prove himself to me, which means actually he wants to play my game, He doesn't want to play himself. He has an image in his mind of what I expect from him. Finished, he is then playing what I expect him to play. Whereas my problem is somehow to place that man in himself, I mean, hoping that he'll discover what he doesn't suspect there is in him, I mean, this is a beautiful struggle, with cinema can allow you, And I think that if you stay in a location, you come to know people, you can do much better than at least what I have done,
When you are in a particular location, say with the potters around the kiln, you've obviously already been there several days and have achieved a certain level of intimacy with them, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I would, yeah. I would have before I film. More than that, again, I think that it's a question of getting involved in the practice. The heavier the equipment and the heavier the unit is much better, because it takes time to bring that damn trolley, It takes time to set up those lights. Then you have this 35mm camera. Then there are those guys get fed up with then it becomes much easier. Because, this quick business is more problematic, actually, I think, unless people also develop, in the same way.
I think in the West, documentary filmmakers lost this with cinema verite because everything was so light and flexible and spontaneous. They could just walk in there with their camera on their shoulder, film it, and leave. Whereas with this heavy equipment that is still used in India for documentary, you have a much more reflective and meditative relationship with what's going on.
At least you have to expose yourself to them.
Yes.
That's a fact, because they want to know what are you doing, how are you doing, and you can come under a lot of criticism,
Yeah.
Sometimes they object to certain things you're doing. Which you can again, there's a kind of a dialogue, because it's not possible, to set up the whole thing easily. And it's really, I think that it then becomes a kind of proper intervention when you have revealed yourself, Otherwise, the other forms of interventions, cultural interventions are not only sporadic, but they are superfluous, because you just capture people as if they were, some objects of interest, and go away. So what you leave behind is just an impression, Whereas I've had very long-standing relations with people, even if I go today to a certain village where I have shot, it's a very good relation, I continue to have that kind of relation. So I really like to.
This hadn't occurred to me really. I've been sort of looking at Indian documentary and thinking that how hung up they've been with 35mm equipment and how heavy and burdensome it was.
But on the other hand,
this other side.
But on the other hand, I must tell you that when you have all these heavy cameras, and if you behave as you have very modern light cameras and equipment like you have, then it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
Because then they, first of all, will never reach the corners, that you can reach with your light equipment. That means you must commit yourself, to your material, to your location, to your people, and do it like that, slowly. But often people take a huge camera and they want to make a cinema verite film, and it's just, the whole thing collapses, it's pointless.
The closest of your films that I've seen, the closest film that comes to the sort of the verite sensibility would be the one I saw today, Arrival, about Bombay. There seemed to be a little bit more of that feeling to it. Is that because it was an earlier work, or do you think I'm maybe misinterpreting it? Or
I would say that you are right in a certain sense. I'd say that I had never made a film entirely handheld, the camera entirely handheld, with my cameraman, of course. I always look into the camera, and I see all the details, even if it's handheld. I like to see what is happening, first, and devise the whole thing. So when this project was given to me, I decided that I'll do a handheld film, and I used an Reflex 2 camera, which is quite light. And I had this cameraman who was plump, but had this very steady hand, a nice chap, and he worked with me in great detail. I thought I'll make a film which is based primarily on the rhythm, and that doesn't mean fast cutting alone, It really means sort of developing the film on account of rhythm, on account of changing rhythms. So I really did the film from that point of view. I would say that cinema verite would be a film in which that verite aspect is the truth of behavior of people. I was not interested in behavior, and it's quite clear from my film. It's when you study human beings and animals, from the point of view of their behaviors, like how monkeys behave, or what kind of calls they make, and it's mating season, or how human beings behave, when they're in a city or in a village or forest. I suppose that's a preoccupation. Is that right or no?
Yes.
The truth is about what? I mean, the verity is about what?
Well, this is obviously a conceptual mess, and it always has been. I mean, this idea of verite.
No, I mean, it must be, of course, relative. It can't be an absolute truth. But it must be a certain point of view.
I mean, lots of people have felt that this method did allow authentic behavior to be seen, but
No, I think that's because otherwise, even a reporting, a reportage would be, which doesn't become cinema verite, which is quite truthful. I suppose it wanted to somehow capture, a behavior of a person who was not conscious of what he was doing, let us say. You can't have a cinema verite film, it's all planned and organized. I suppose it has to take place.
that
I don't know, I mean,
aesthetic for sure.
the whole problem is really to understand what is spontaneity, or what you think spontaneity is. I think spontaneity is a certain effortlessness, I think like that. I don't think it is the first thing that happens. You become effortless after a little practice, So it's nice. The rigor is nice for me. I don't know. I mean, that's how I feel or look at it. Anyway, I feel very doubtful about my work always, so I'm not able to talk very authoritatively about my work, as it were. I feel whether whatever I have done is right, or I mean, I'm always in doubt.
Well, it is. Your work is very observant of behavior. I mean, it certainly is very perceptive on that level. I mean, when you watch someone working, or when you watch musicians performing, or you watch a potter at the wheel, you're certainly interested in details of gesture and behavior and the way a person's body moves in relation to the object they're working on. I mean, that is certainly there.
But for example, in that film, Mind of Clay,
Yeah.
I'll ask you a question. I've used an actress. She's from an urban situation. But my idea was that I'm not going to make only anthropological or ethnographic work. I'm going to even go to a museum. I'm going to go to a village, Or I might go to some abandoned place where clay figures are present. Similarly, I'll have some people from city. I'll have people from villages, So I took that actress along, whom I had known for some years. Now, I had this great problem of how to use a text which I had devised from all kinds of material. 22 hours of tape of my interviews with potters, anthropological material, archaeological books, on archaeology, I mean, art history. I and the guy who wrote the dialogue worked on a massive research material and devised a poetic language, in which everything cohered on account of how the language will flow in film, and the ideas are really absorbed. They don't, in that sense, illustrate any idea. In fact, the central idea of the film, which is really discovering the so-called matrilineal society as expressed in the clay pots, and clay figurines, and the change that occurred to the patrilineal, that is the fatherite, and that change was really violent. So I chose 3 myths. One which I felt really expressed what could have been a mother-raised society whenever, because it's itself apparently a very debatable subject. And the other myth that I chose actually showed the beheading of mother and her transformation into a witch. That is in this the third myth where she is beheaded. The third myth, the father dominates, and all the goddesses of yore, they become all witches. Somehow the vehicle is the same. The animal, what you call vahan, is the same. If some goddess rode a donkey, the witch also rides a donkey. If the goddess rode a tiger, the witch also rides a tiger. But it changed. So I used these 3 myths. But again, I was not interested in enacting these myths in the film. But there are innumerable references to these myths in the story. So I really feel that a myth is nothing more than a structure.
Well, I thought the analogy between making a myth or creating a myth and creating an object was certainly implied by the whole structure of the film.
Absolutely, yeah. But people get surprised when I tell them the narrative behind the myth, that's they have regular stories, which I didn't want to use, I didn't want to illustrate. So I treated it like a structure upon which I can improvise, the stories are very, if you see it carefully, the stories are very much present in the dialogues and text and commentary and all that.
Well, it's a little bit hard to absorb all of it from subtitles. I think if you're following it with the language.
Actually, if you see a film twice or thrice, if you don't get bored with it.
I tried to see it twice, but you came back too soon.
Well, then you can, I think, follow certain dialogues and texts.
But I thought you used the actress to sort of speak all of this as a way of creating the structure of speech and objects or
No.
culture and all.
So what I was asking really.
Yeah, what were you asking?
I seem to go away from the topic always.
Like your films.
Huh?
Like your films.
Well, it has to be either concentric or eccentric, Moves away from the centric. No, what I was asking you is the problem that you have a person who is urban, an actress, and you have these villages. Now, how do you make a film? Because often I have seen, at least in India, I don't know, that this very urban-looking lady would be going to a village and asking, the potters, In fact, we had a joke where this TV, while we were making the film, some TV group was doing something on one of the potters, and she asked her this question, that do you dream? Do you have a dream, So he, in Hindi, my language, he understood that, she said, do you dream? And he understood that, do you have a dream? So he said, yes, I have a dream. I want a house. I want a nice, what do you call that? The wheel and on which to make pots. And I want She said, no. Do you dream? It was very funny. So when I heard this, the dialogue writer was with me, And I always keep the guy who writes like a cameraman, incidentally, on the spot. Like you light up something and he has a basic structure in his mind and he might write a sentence for me and I might work with him. So I like that the guy who writes the text to be with me like a technician, So we immediately thought up and had an interview based on this idea of dream.
With the little girl.
With the little girl. And she told us a beautiful dream,
Yes.
Real dream,
But what she told you wasn't written. That was her.
No, it was her dream. Yeah, no. We wrote the lines for this actress to interview her, and sort of prepared her because You see, unless you prepare the actress, the non-actors tend to stray too far away, yeah? So it's good to keep a certain, a little organized level at the level of the actress.
Was that the only time that the actress actually dialogued with one of the characters?
That's true, yeah. Because
a very special moment.
Exactly, exactly. And I did it very deliberately. And this is what I was trying to say, that in order to bring them together, I kept them apart. Because it's very simple. You have to accept the fact that she is urban. And you have to accept the fact that they are from a different rural background, Otherwise, this urban thing looking down upon the rural is too much, I just...
Well, this is the whole tradition of films division and documentary everywhere, isn't it?
No, but you should respect both and therefore keep them independent, but bring them into one space. So there is a hope that there might be a dialogue. At the moment, there is not. I mean, a person who is from an urban situation in India can only look down upon somebody from the rural area. And often this keeps on coming in television and films, These fellows go there and interview and, it's terrible. And people who are in some condition of famine and drought and it's neither respecting the urban sensibility, which begins to look artificial for people who think that rural is natural. I mean, which is ridiculous. Why? There are very beautiful urban traditions, People think in urban societies and they're also natural in their own way, So it has to be respected, this idea that somebody is from an urban background. So you're quite right. I think you really hit the point, Because I was very conscious of this fact that I am taking an actress. And it so happens that that actress, soon after my documentary, about 2 months after that, started acting in a serial, in a sort of soap opera, And she has become a sensational actress after my film. Now I'm telling you some paradoxical problem, That is, it's very strange that she acted in my film. And I had known her and she was really struggling at that time, and I called her home. And when I told her that you have to act in my film, she said, I don't believe that you're really offering me a part because I'm looking for one for so long. I said, well, this is not a tall story, I said, you will have to, it's a strange problem, Then I explained to her, the whole problem of acting in my film. And she said, no, I'll work very hard. And she really worked very hard. But after that, she acted in that serial and became terribly popular. Now, I had a problem on hand. After this serial, which went into film 52 or 100 parts, over a year, twice a week. And she was the main actress in that. She was known everywhere. So after 1 year, when the serial finished, whenever I showed my documentary, I really had a problem because they would identify her with that character. And you know how television burns actors and actresses, it really reduces them to a type, especially the serials. They really make people into a type, And not only a type, a particular character, even the identity, I think, sort of vanishes. So I really had a problem, I mean, I had really neutralized her. And suddenly she was that character in the minds of people. Whenever I show that film, it is the strangest thing, And that guy who we're talking about, Dhrupad, the guy who reads poetry,
Yes.
He also became very popular in a serial before that,
With lucky impact
with the result,
on these people.
No, with the result, that fellow was playing a drunkard, in that serial. So whenever they show Dhrupad, everybody will shout about his drunkenness and, it's really ridiculous.
Well, he looked a little bit incapacitated in one, two of his...
Well, he drinks, actually. I tell you that. But it's very strange. Both these actors, they acted in my documentaries. And in fact, that actor was telling me how he and Anita, the girl, the woman in my film, how both of them actually became so popular, after acting.
You could use this to your advantage and open these films in theaters and promote them as star vehicles, couldn't you?
I don't know, because people then expect sort of different kind of film altogether, You get a bit disappointed.
Yes. I just want to make sure we're covering territory. Oh, I know. I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about how you see your audience and maybe a little bit about financing and production of your films.
These are really difficult questions, The audience is the most difficult one. Because I've had such a problem with all my films. All my films. I've had problems with audience. And I have been dubbed by everybody as a guy who has been working against audience. So you'd be surprised that they made a 2-part serial on the new cinema in India, and they did not interview me. And it's just a chance that Channel 4 also is making a film on new Indian cinema, which is actually essentially based on me. Because at the same time when they were making, they were also making, and I was interviewed for 2 hours by them. But the thing that I'm trying to say is that there is an enormous resistance to my work from filmmakers. It's a group of filmmakers who have made that serial, 2-part serial.
For Indian television.
Yeah. And they have just shown an excerpt from my first film and said that this was a milestone and it altered the whole way of looking at cinema. It could not get an audience, but it did this and did that. 1.5-minute snippet, And that's the end of the matter. And of course, they have not included all those people who belong to that kind of tradition that I'm speaking of, who are my friends and colleagues, are not included in that. So it's very strange that from the so-called colleagues, I have tremendous resistance, They think that, and they accuse me all the time of being in the clouds, of working against the audience, of deliberately making films that are self-indulgent, of remaining in, totally indifferent to the problem of finance, for example. So this is a question that has, all my life, last 22 years, I've faced this problem of a rejection from the audience and a rejection from most of the filmmakers in India. I was rejected right from the beginning, from my first film onwards.
Well, I guess there's such a tradition of populist cinema here that someone who makes films that don't fit into the genres, the popular genres, or
You said populist before.
Yes.
No, because you see, there is a school of popular cinema. Then there is a populist one also. Because I like to distinguish between the two. I don't mind the popular cinema.
No.
Which is really the big time commercial film, which has huge stars and which really makes mass fantasies, I call that popular cinema. But between that popular cinema and my kind of work, which is struggling with problems of cinematography and so on, there is this middle section, which is interesting, which is made up of people from advertising, who still run advertising concerns. These are very strange, a lot of people. They're mostly from advertising, and they make films that are socially relevant. They are the ones who will make films about our social problems and evils. And they are the ones who speak a language which verges on some kind of leftism, who, of course, would get bored if they read 3 pages of Marx in original, because Marx is very difficult to read. Marx's thesis on Feuerbach, which is written in points like that, and a guy who makes socially relevant films, I'm sorry, I'm using in such a derogatory way this term, socially relevant. I asked him, you read this for me. I want to know what is written in this thesis on Feuerbach, Because there is such a reduction of Marx's thought, that is incredible. If you read Marx originally, he's such a fantastic thinker, He's an incredible philosopher, But in this sloganeering and this whole populist business of, developing crowds and masses, there's such a reduction of that thought, that these are the people I think have killed the whole tradition of Marx.
Well, the Indian political parties don't really elevate the rhetoric, do they? The so-called Marxist parties here, the language they use.
Well, I must say that at least the CPI-M has worked always for very national causes, It's been always opposed to any kind of communal stand, and it has had that integrity, as a party. I mean, if you look at other parties, they are terribly fundamentalist or communal or parochial, whereas that particular party has never been regional, parochial, fundamentalist or communal, and never ever uh, try to profit, from such narrow stand, But again, when you think of their relation with the artists, you find that they also want filmmakers that are so-called populist, who are not popular in the mass sense, but who make these films that are viable. This is a category of filmmakers who get awards, whose film go to festivals, and they also make money at the box office, enough to recover their money and some profit. So it works very well for everybody. It works well for the financiers, it works well for the government, because they raise all the right issues, and it works well for themselves.
You're talking about the social issue films of the new cinema movement, things like
Don't mention film to me, because don't mention the name of any of my colleagues, and I will never mention the name of any of my colleagues talking to you.
Well, I just want to make sure I know what you're talking about. I mean, I do. You're talking about these social problem films.
I'm reminded of that. Have you seen that serial, Yes, Prime Minister?
No.
It's very nice. He wants to know, the name of that economic advisor who was advised against the raise of the civil servants. He said, I want to know the name. So he said, no, I can't give you the name. He said, no, I want to know the name, this fellow said. So he said, no, I can't give you her name. He said, thank you. Because there's only one lady around who has been advising the Prime Minister against these fellows, civil servants. So you know the name.
Okay, so where were we heading?
Don't worry. We don't have to reach anywhere.
That's true. So there is this problem that you've always felt in India with the reception of your films and the audiences you've managed to reach here. And judging from the fact that your films have been televised in Europe a lot, that sort of adds to the contradictions, because there's a certain European audience that follows your films very enthusiastically. Does that also cause you concern?
No, I really think of cinema as only possible internationally, not an internationalism, as reflected in co-productions especially, not that. But I do believe, that cinema is the only discipline that inherits this world, And if there's going to be filmmaking, it should be a worldwide audience, worldwide financing, worldwide filmmaking, We must break, from these national barriers, as far as cinema is concerned.
Most filmmakers who are able to communicate internationally have very strong roots in their own culture first and speak to their own culture first. I mean, there are exceptions to that. I would say Tarkovsky is probably an exception, because his later work never really had a home audience because it wasn't allowed to.
What about Straub, for example? Jean-Marie?
Yeah, well, he's another example of a filmmaker, I suppose, without a popular domestic audience.
A wonderful filmmaker.
Oh, sure.
You see, I really feel, that I do not know what is Indian. Whereas my involvement with Indian philosophy, let's say, has been quite consistent, and I have not only studied but tried to understand Indian traditions of art in terms of music, painting. For instance, I have studied Mughal miniatures, which is the Mughal tradition of painting miniatures.
Yeah.
And I have tried to suggest a theory which I think follows the principles of music and trying to understand. And I have very closely followed a certain philosophical discipline, but I don't understand still what is Indian. I don't understand. Much less what is Bengali. I don't know if some people he used to tell me that if a woman is sitting in the kitchen and this peculiar curving knife is there and she's slicing the fish and there's a cat, that's very Bengali. I hope not. Because I don't know, I mean, I don't think that's the essence of a culture. The Bengali culture, or the contribution that the Bengalis have made to our culture, or to their culture, if they want to feel like that, is enormous and it's very different. And whenever a filmmaker, like my teacher, Ritwik Ghatak, I don't want to speak of Mr. Ray, but Ritwik Ghatak was one of the great filmmakers that this country has known. I suppose you must have heard his name.
Of course, I've seen.
And he taught me in the film school for 1.5 years. And I was really his errand boy because I was his favorite, and every time, anywhere he went, I'll be with him. If he came to Bombay, I'll be following him. If he went to a bar, I'll be there, and that's where I learned tricking, incidentally, with him. So when he made film, he really made films on real emotional problems. But he was very much a Bengali. He was very much a part of that culture. But he was not a Bengali, you know. He was really somebody who belonged to this world, you know. And you see his films and you realize that this man is dealing with archetypes, you know. He's not dealing with local culture.
But as a non-fiction director, you are dealing with very concrete materials, a musical tradition, a artisanal tradition of making pots that is specifically.
But I'm sure that I'm trying to discover something universal, you know, in that tradition.
Of course. So you're reaching a universal through a very specific local phenomenon, aren't you?
Yeah. So I would like to return to that phenomena in a transformed way. And I'd like these people to transform themselves. I don't want a guy to, you know, because he comes from Rajasthan, should keep on making that pot all his life, you know. He can make something else. He can enhance that tradition, you know. I think his reduction into being a folk potter who can only produce a limited number of shapes is ridiculous, because today's world, his skill must enhance, you know, from his tradition. I'd be very happy if he started making more forms which emerge, you know, from the form that he has made, you know, by an awareness of other forms and an awareness of himself.
Otherwise, it's a dead art form. I agree.
But this is what we are doing. By making films that emphasize this idea of regionalness and truthfulness to a culture. We try to reduce that man or a certain ritual to a meaning where, at any rate, the cultural resonance of that ritual is anyway over. I mean, it had a very deep link with certain months of the year and certain seasons and certain changes that were occurring in the agricultural life and cycle of nature. That is all over today. So it is more and more removed from its actual function. So if it is going to become an art, that is so. It should be really protected from turning into a craft. I mean, it should really become an expression of this man, and therefore he should be allowed a wider horizon. So I quite understand that I'm beginning from a restricted area. But the moment I universalize, I want that man to come with me, you know. I do not know whether he can do this or his son will do it, you know, or who will do it. But my ambition would be to make him realize that he is much more, you know, than the two shapes that he is making. It's too much, you know, to reduce a folk dancer to few steps, you know, so that all her life she's going to dance like that.
Well, there are ethnographic films that do freeze a form as a artifact of the past, and there are films that I think show them evolving and interacting with a changing environment. And I would say yours do the latter, whereas some of the tourist films do the former, or some of the conventional sort of artifact films do the former. I mean, I think you do see this evolution in your films, showing the musicians or the potters or or I forget what other areas you dealt with.
Even music, I would say, I'd like to, the film that I'm going to make next month, beginning next month, I would very much want that particular form, which is called Tumuri, should actually, everybody tells me that this is a dying form. How can you say that? How can you say that a particular form of music is a dying form? It lives because people practice. Even if there are two people practicing, it is going to live. Music of the players who have played in my film, Dhrupad, often very responsible people dealing with music in India, will tell you that this form is dead or is dying. I don't know what they mean by it, Like that new cinema serial, the two parts that came on television that I was talking about. All of them. And it's a sad thing because they were all filmmakers. There were one or two entrepreneurs also. And they are all right if they say that this cinema is dead. But the filmmakers, they all said this is dead. They're all burying the new cinema. What would I say if you asked me that is the new cinema dead? For me, 22 years have passed struggling with a certain form. How can it die? I'll have to die before it dies. How can this cinema die? I can't understand. I would be dead before it dies because it'll die with me. It cannot die before I die.
I don't know what they mean. I guess they mean that films are being produced differently and the environment is changing. And
I think they were not there in it in the first place.
Probably. I'd like to see it.
But I know. Yeah, you do that because it's quite a document.
So I did also suggest that you comment on financing. You must have had a tricky relationship over the years with the films division, and
Fortunately not, I would say, I must say that the films division has never interfered with my way of working. And of course, due to their own policy, which is determined by the government of India, they are not able to give me a film every 6 months. And I, of course, also cannot make a film every 6 months. It takes me at least 1.5 years to do a film. But my relationship with Films Division has been very fruitful in a sense that they have allowed me to make films, and they have somehow managed to give me almost the amount of money I require, not always what I would wish. Only thing is that I wish there were a way of making a little longer films, for me. I want to make very long films, and I'm always come up with this problem of 30 minutes, 70 minutes, 90 minutes. I like to make long films, 2-3 hours, If I can find a sponsor who would allow me to make a 3-hour long film, I'll be very happy,
Do the European television networks give you any more leeway than Films Division, or is it the same?
Well, there has been, a plan to make a serial on music, classical music, and that has been going on for years, about nearly 5-6 years. And the problem has been duration, because they want that every part should not exceed 25 minutes. At least that is unacceptable to me. I always tell that lady, who is trying to organize, that you find some other filmmaker, but she's quite insistent to work with me. I have told her that is impossible, So one is faced with the same kind of problem, I think, vis-a-vis the European television.
We're almost done. We're just filming your father. It's on.
Yeah. Come here, come here. Come here.
Say hello.
You come and sit here. 2 more minutes.
Okay, we've been going a long time. I forgot the time. It must be over an hour, is it?
Yes, it's an hour.
Okay. Well, we could go on forever, but I think we've covered a lot of territory. Do you feel that you want to add or pursue something?
No, I would just say, I think that with every government, or agencies, there should be a recognition of the difference between cinema and video. And I think there should be a very distinct sponsorship, of cinema, because it's really as cinema and not as, the various uses it's being put to.
That's a very critical issue right now everywhere, isn't it?
As cinema, I think it will contribute tremendously to a world understanding,
It may even be a lost battle, actually. I mean,
Really?
most of our filmmakers are having to co-finance with television.
Yeah, that's the case in India also, I think, for beginning to.
Do you think a films division sees you as a kind of prestige art filmmaker that they can sell abroad to?
I don't think they have made money on my film. One. Number two, if they did that, then I think they would give me films more often and give me a little more money.
Not to make money, though, but to sort of sell prestige rather than
The reality.
merchandise. That it's good for them to have someone winning prizes in festivals.
I also don't win so many prizes. That's another problem, actually. I haven't won so many prizes as some of my more famous colleagues have, actually.
But you do show up in foreign festivals, and that's a certain...
That I would, yeah. I suppose my films are shown there. I don't know, because I don't think there is I wish there was an awareness that so at least I could pass my life more easily.
Do you like your father's movies?
Yeah.
Goodness. You see them all?
I don't think I've seen it. Whoever seen it, I liked it.
Oh, good. Okay, well, let's stop there, shall we?
Thanks.